Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge we are on Treaty 1 and Dakota Nation's territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the members of the panel. In the committee room is Mr. Neil Harden, and joining us on Zoom is Mr. Robert Hutchings. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing today. The secretary for today's hearing is Ms. Kara Belshaw, and representing the City of Winnipeg Assessment Taxation Department is Mr. Mark Colatruglio. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of property are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with property to be addressed following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. Excuse me. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Just a note, if you have a cell phone, would you please put that on silent? And today we'll be hearing items 1, 4, and 5 on the docket. I'll have you swear the parties in, please. The first property we'll deal with is 2591 Portage.
Mr. Assessor, for the record, can you please state your name?
Mark Colatruglio.
Do you affirm the evidence you will present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, for the record, can you please state your name?
My name is Sid Story.
Do you affirm the evidence you will present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Mr. Story. You are here representing the owners for 3 properties on today's docket.
That's
and it's the matter is the assessed value only that we're dealing with. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I thank you. So we'll just hear them as they're listed on the docket. So first property we will hear is 2591 Portage Avenue. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Thank you. So this is file number 21-202, the applicant Fair Tax Realty Advocates. The roll number here is 0707-389-6100. The civic address 2591 Portage Avenue, and the owner is Watson Investments Limited. The roll year under appeal 2022. This is April 1st, 2018 reference date. And the current assessed value under appeal is $809,000. And I believe this is a board ordered value from the 2020 appeal that was filed by the same applicant. You can see a copy of the board order on my brief, page 13 and 14. And I'll just note that the board, in the details portion of this order, has written, decision is based on net operating income presented by the applicant with a capitalization rate of 8%. So this was based partially on the valuation that was presented by Fairtax during the 2020 appeal. Now, the 2020 appeal would also have the April 1st, 2018 reference date. So that's important to note. Going back to page 2 of my brief, you'll see that the owner has responded to both requests for information. So no issues there. No subject property leases to note at this time. There was a sale. The current owner bought this property post-reference, so I won't divulge into the details, but they bought it in August of 2018 in a multi-role sale that included a parking lot on Aldine Street, which is located to the rear of the subject property on 2591 Portage. On page 3, you'll see some photos, a map view, and as well as an aerial view of the subject property. The additional parking lot that was included in the sale, not that it's of much importance for today's discussion, but you can see that the parking lot with the assessed value of $123,000 to the rear of the property there, that was included in the purchase when they bought it. But today we're just dealing with 2591 Portage and not the parking lot in the back. If you flip to page 4 of the brief, you'll see some street view photos showing the front of the building. I believe the building is currently vacant. And you'll see a photo of the rear of the property showing that there is some on-site parking to the rear of the building. On a further comment to the vacancy, it does appear that the building has been vacant for some time. There has been, I looked into some of the permit history of this particular property. There was some permits that were filed, applications for permits that were filed in 2019, and looks like never really fully went through with whatever work was proposed for that particular permit application. In 2021, it's this earlier this year in March, another permit application was received with a redevelopment plan. It also appears that permit application is currently on hold. The work that was included in the scope of work under that permit was fairly extensive. It included demolishing the interior, constructing new partition walls, doors, stairs, ramp, elevator, exterior doors to be replaced, roof patching. At this point, I'm not certain as to what the status of this renovation is, if any of it was undertaken or not. So that kind of covers the vacancy history of the property. Now, the property is currently valued. The property usage is as CMRRE, which is our restaurant parcel use code, 1 building, 2 premises, 2 stories, actual year built of 1964, with a leasable area of 7,455 square feet. C2 zoning, and located directly on Portage Avenue. In regards to the valuation of this property, I've provided some rental comparables on page 5 of my brief. These are mainly restaurant comparables due to the parcel use that's been assigned to this property based on its historical usage. Until we see a permit that's been completed and closed out, and we've inspected the changes that have been made, the parcel usage won't be changed. So currently, looking at the rental comparables, there's a range here as low as $15 a square, as low as $12.50 a square foot, to as high as $29.67 a square foot. Going on to page 6 of the brief, you'll notice the income workup as produced by the model. The model applies $14.94 a square foot for a leasable area of 3,955 square feet on the main floor. On the upper level, which we have tagged as storage/office retail mezzanine, a lower rate of $9.04 a square foot for the 3,500 square feet of leasable area. The total potential rent, $90,728. We've got a market vacancy adjustment of 3%, and expense allowance of 2%, shortfall at $750 a square foot for a net operating income $84,569. The overall capitalization used is 8%, and I'll note that the 8% matches what was used by the Board of Revision for the purposes of the 2020 assessment appeal and the subsequent order that was issued by the board. The capitalized value for this property using the model would be $1,057,113. But again, because the board had ordered a value, the value that's in place is the $809,000. I'm not seeking an increase today, so I am looking for the board to confirm that value, $809,000. Page 7, you'll just see an income summary of the valuation produced by the model. Just again, noting that the final estimated market value is in fact an override based on the board order. Page 8 is our table of capitalization rates. We don't have the restaurant category shown on this table, and we don't have a retail store shown on this table. Those would be the two most applicable for cap rate purposes. But the modeled rate for this particular property, 8% capitalization rate. Page 9 through 12 is the income and expense questionnaire that was submitted by the owner online for the 12 months ending 04/30 of 2017. So this would have been the last submission that we received prior to the reference date of April 1st of 2018, without including any, if their year end is end of April, then there would have been for the 2018 submission about a month worth of post-reference information. So this is the full year of data prior to the reference date. There really isn't much to note on here. It's owner occupied fully at the time. This is the previous owner had submitted this particular income and expense questionnaire. They do have some expenses that are listed on there, but they don't list any revenue. So it's not of much use in regards to calculating a valuation for the purposes of this hearing. Again, page 13 and 14, that's the original Board of Revision order. And page 15 of the brief is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. And then page 16 through to the back of the brief, page 20 is or 21, I should say, is our standard package that we've included with all of the Board of Revision applications for this assessment cycle. So this is the 2020 Board of Revision addenda information, but also to be included for today's hearing, as we're still in the same assessment cycle with the same reference date. So that's my presentation. I'm looking for the board to confirm the value as it stands at $809,000, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon.
Did you have an opportunity to inspect the site?
I have not.
Okay. Has anybody from the department, to your knowledge, inspected?
No, not that I had seen through our notes.
Okay. And you have two different revenue streams, a storage rate and a rate for the typical restaurant. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's one rent applied for the main floor and then one rent applied for the upper level.
Yeah. And are you aware what the upper level has been historically?
No, it's my understanding that it was used by the owner. The owner in their income and expense questionnaire list themselves as the tenant for the upper level, Marigold.
Right.
That's on page 11 of the brief. But other than that, I'm not certain as to what the extent of the usage was up there.
Okay. And on page 1 of your brief, and you didn't reference it in presenting, they show you the city shows no parking stalls at all, but you've indicated there appears to be some space at the back.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm not certain as to why a count was never put in the property description portion of our system. But yeah, just visually, like I said, I have not inspected the property to verify or stalls within the back, but it does appear that there is space along the chain link fence that you can see on page 4 of the brief, where you could potentially park some vehicles on site.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you did mention, I just want to make sure that we all understand, the property on Eldine, which is an adjacent street, that's the 123,000 is a separate roll, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And if you go to and then I won't spend a lot of time on your comps, but your comps, the majority of these comps are under 3,000 square feet. They're quite a bit smaller than the subject property. Do you agree?
That's correct, yeah. With the exception of 800 Pemina, which is 8,000 square feet, most of them are smaller than the subject, yes.
And you must be familiar with 800 Pemina, that's Brazen Hall.
That's correct, yeah.
And that was completely rebuilt from the ground up. It was formerly the Round Table.
That is correct, yeah.
Does it have any second storage space? Second floor?
I do not believe it does, no.
And it's 8,000 square feet, and it's got a brewery in there, and we don't know exactly what the landlord costs were there. Are you aware of, do you know if that would be a non-arm's length transaction between father and son?
In regards to the lease?
Yes.
I'm not certain. It may be, and that's a very good question. If that's in question, then I would for sure question the validity of the use of the $25 rent for sure. If it's an associated lease between a father and son, not something that typically would be considered market.
Correct. Okay. And then just looking at them very, very quickly. 500 Portage is the sushi gem across from the University of Winnipeg. You familiar with that site?
Yep.
That's main floor. There's no second level in that property, correct?
That's correct, yep.
And that's at $1,250 a square foot, 4,100 square feet. And it kind of ties in with the square footage of either the lower being 3,900 or the upper being 35. So it's kind of in that range. So it would appear to be a reasonable comp. Would you agree?
1,250, yeah. The size of that unit and the restaurant usage, yep, I would say it's a good comparable.
Reasonable comparison, okay. And there's one here I couldn't find. It's 120. Just give me 1 second. 120 Donald. What is that, Mark? That's 1, 2, 3, 4 from the top.
Yeah, appears to be a restaurant usage. Unit 2 of 120 Donald 2,597 square feet, $16 a square foot. October 1st, 2016 lease.
Okay, you don't know who it is, what the operation is?
I have the name. I've redacted most of the tenant names just for privacy purposes.
Okay, with it. Okay, and then if we just go to page 6, we won't take much more time. Do your records indicate that property has been shut down since the death of Mr. Wu on July 1st of 2017? Are you aware of that?
That the property is currently vacant as a result of that?
It has been
Yep.
since July 1st
Yep.
of 2017. Mr.
Yep,
Wu, the founder, passed away, and it's never been released. Are you also aware that there's no elevator or handicap access to the second floor?
Yep. In the old arrangement of the building as a restaurant, it doesn't appear that there was an elevator or anything like that. Like I said, an elevator was contemplated in the permit application that was submitted in March of this year. But again, without knowing where that permit application is at, like I said, it's currently on hold. So I don't know what work they've undertaken, but I would assume that there's no elevator here at this property.
I can give you some information quickly. There was an offer to lease from a funeral operator, and it looked like there was a long, protracted negotiation. Permits were applied for, and then it fell through. There's now another potential purchaser. I think they have the property under contract now, and it's intended to redevelop the entire site to use it as a fitness facility, so just so you know. But it hasn't operated as a restaurant and couldn't. I don't think it would get occupancy. I think the handicap access was grandfathered. But we'll move on from there. So in spite of the fact it's been closed for 4 years and vacant, you're suggesting a 3% vacancy loss is appropriate? And is 3%, how does that relate to restaurants generally?
Well, that would be the model. That would be the modeled market vacancy for this property type as a restaurant. Obviously, with the property being vacant, it can be many things, not just a restaurant. But that is when we're looking at mass appraisal and we're looking at property classification and usage. This is still based on the former usage, and as a result, it gets the market vacancy rate. Now that rate is 3%. This building is certainly more vacant than that. But again, I think it's important to note that the value under appeal is based on, in part, the net operating income that was presented at the 2020 assessment appeal. Mm-hmm. And that was using a 15% vacancy allowance based on the brief that you submitted for the 2020 appeal. Mm-hmm. So certainly the 3% that the model shows is significantly lower than the 15% allowance that was given in the calculation of the NOI for 2020.
Why wasn't the 15 given in this brief on page 6? Why was not 15 there?
Because what you're seeing is the model workup. You're not seeing the board ordered workup. So in part, the board order contemplated, it appears at least, the city cap rate, but fair tax NOI that was submitted for the 2020 appeal.
And that included 15% vacancy allowance.
Yeah, it's my understanding that in calculating the NOI that was presented by yourself or by the representative of fair tax, that a 15% vacancy allowance was applied.
Yeah, okay. And management fee, we'll be going into in all 3 files, but management fee 5%, you haven't allowed it. Yes,
so city policy, we apply a 2% non-recoverable expense allowance. Mm-hmm. You guys have applied 5% for management and then 2% for other as part of the calculation of the NOI that was submitted for this property for the 20. So it does appear that the current value as it stands, ordered by the board, does include 5% vacancy as a part of the evidence that you had put together for the 2020 appeal.
So the 5% is accepted.
Well, it's not accepted by the city, but it was not appealed further, right? So our when we're putting forward a value proposal, we would not include a 5%. But like I said, the value here today is actually a board ordered value that's under appeal. And in this instance, it's based partially on the applicant's NOI as stated on the board order. So that would include your adjustment for management there.
So just if you can, in a very short explanation, explain to me what happened between the 1,057,113 and the 809. Why was the workup done at 1,057,057, but the value was the decision?
Because internally, we don't change the valuation based on the board orders. The modeled value remains in place, but when we're making modifications to the assessment and tax roll, we go based off of the board orders. So while we would have had a position north of $1 million for this property, that's not what the board ordered. So at the end of the day, when we're making changes to the roll, we go with what the board has ordered. So that's the 809,000.
Okay, I'll probably be asking you that question again. I still don't follow it, to be honest. I understand the fact that 809 is the decision, but I don't know why we use this workup this fashion and then allowed for additional value, but adjustments were not. So we'll pass on that. Thank you. Just going to page 8. For some reason, restaurants, are they included in retail in your page 8? Cap rate?
No, they are not.
Where's the information on restaurants?
We actually don't show a category for restaurants, and I covered that in my presentation. It's not something that's shown on this table. So, if we're looking at outside sources, CBRE, Colliers, Cushman Wakefield, they don't typically show restaurants as its own category either. And that's part of the reason why they're not shown here on this table. But yeah, they're not there.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, questions for the assessor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mark. I'm going to start on page 3, please. Your photos.
Sure.
Site location. Are we located just west of Moray, I guess, on the north side of Portage? Would that be correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next photo is that aerial view showing the subject property, and the current property owner does own that lot, that parking lot across the lane from the subject property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so any tenants would have, or owners would have access to that parking lot. Is that right? Potentially.
Presumably, yeah. I mean, it'll depend on how the owner decides they want to lease out the property. But yeah, that presumably they would have that option at least.
Okay.
To have parking in that additional lot.
Thank you. Next photo down is the front and rear of the subject property. Would you know how old that picture is?
No, I can't give you the age. This comes from a Google Street View. They typically do every year, but I couldn't tell you exactly for this photo. I didn't make note of it.
Okay. The history on this, it was a Marigold restaurant with that signature window facade there, I guess, that they all had.
Correct, yeah. And it appears that it's since been, there is a more current sales / lease advertisement for this property. It's post reference, but in that it does show new windows, and it does reference a new roof. So yeah, it's a dated photo for sure.
Okay. And the rear, the property line would be that chain link fence. I guess it would be on the west side of the property. And then I guess the edge of the garbage bin or would be the left side of the building. That would be the parking area at the rear of the property with that, I'll call it adjacent parking lot across the lane. Okay. Yeah. So you made reference to permits. No, first of all, okay, I'll ask you. So that picture you showed may not be representative of the current physical condition of the property. Would that be fair?
Correct. I would say it's probably a dated photo. Okay,
thank you. And you made reference to permits taken out on the property. Has an assessor visited the property to do a follow-up on any of these permits as yet?
Not yet. Typically, we would wait until the work is done. We wouldn't visit properties in an interim kind of state unless there was some sort of lingering issue. Yeah. In this case, it may be warranted. There was both a permit application in 2019 that appears to have fizzled out. So this may have been off the market for a while in 2019 as a result of whatever plan or potential tenant that they had lined up. And then the same can be said for this year. There was an application that was made in March of 2021. But again, none have seen their way through to completion of a project. So it wouldn't trigger an inspection quite yet. But certainly, if there was a redevelopment of this property, we would want to do an inspection so that we have a full understanding of the changes that have been undertaken.
Now, I understand that now we're talking a post-reference sale for 5 months after the April 1st date for valuation, but the property is currently listed for sale. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's my understanding that there's a current listing. It's either available or it's either or for sale or lease. But again, because it's post-reference, I'm not going to dive into the details of it.
Okay, the reason I ask is to determine the current physical condition of the property. And I'm wondering if, without mentioning the sale price, would we be able to determine the current physical condition of the property from that asking price and that lease asking price?
Maybe. I mean, it's hard for me to say. It's the listing isn't part of my evidence, so I can't really draw from it. I can speak to it kind of orally, but again, it's without having gone on site myself, I don't really know exactly what state the property is in. The pictures from the listing appeared to be mostly exterior photos of the property. So I can see that there's new windows and there's reference to a new roof or some work that was done on the roof. But beyond that, I can't speak to the interior.
Did you mention it was gutted?
The listing mentions it's been gutted, but again, I can't verify it because I have no pictures. I have no time on site myself.
Okay. And in reference to Mr. Story's questions, your work up on page 6, that's a model workup, but because of the board's order, you're respecting that value and you revised that assessment for 2022 to respect the board's order to $809,000.
That's correct. Yeah. So when this was appealed for 2020, and the board made its order, that flows through to the subsequent assessment rolls until the next general reassessment. In this case, because the province has extended the assessment cycle, that's why typically 2022 would have been the reassessment year, but they've actually extended it 1 year. So yeah, it's still the value that's in place as of the Board of Revision's order on the 2020. But again, same reference date, right? April 1st of 2018.
Yeah, okay. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harden, any questions for the assessor?
I have no questions that haven't been asked and answered.
Thank you. Just one question. When does a property, in the opinion of the assessment department, when does a property start to suffer a chronic vacancy? Is there a time frame?
I think it varies based on circumstance. I mean, if you see multiple assessment cycles where the property is vacant, no work is being undertaken, there seems to be no interest, then I think you would start to look at whether or not an adjustment should be made. The other thing too is that typically when we're reviewing these properties for the purposes of the board revision, it is mass appraisal. We do go to the market, right? So site specific might be slightly different vacancy wise than the market overall is going to say. But in this case, because there has been a history of some permits that have gone in, and it appears that some work has been undertaken, but again, the extent of which it hasn't been seen through to any completion on a permit, at least, that would trigger us to go and make changes. But certainly it might be warranted if in fact there is a tenant lined up and some changes that are still due to be completed at the property.
Thank you. So any sign of permits or upgrading or work being done kind of would negate that?
Yeah, right. It shows that it's not necessarily vacancy as a result of poor performance on the market. It could just be that the property is in a state of redevelopment and it's not on the market. So until we really see that the property is sitting in one kind of state for an extended period of time, we don't really look to a chronic vacancy adjustment.
Thank you. And not to overkill, but once again, your evaluation, that's the model-driven one. And you've presented the decision by the board as the final value. You said it wasn't appealed to the municipal board by the city, but I'm making the assumption that you didn't override any of the model values because you didn't necessarily agree with that valuation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So the model still maintains its value within our system, but again, the internal system that generates this brief is drawing from the model itself and not from the tax or assessment roll, which is where the board order comes in.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Story, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look at the front page of our brief, you'll see the subject property. That is a fairly current photograph. I'm not aware of any windows or roof work that's been done. It may have been applied for, but I'm not aware that anything is done. It may be wrong, but I don't think so. We'll go right to our position paper. There's our page 3. And we've used a 1250 square foot market rent for the main floor and 1050 for the upper. That's assuming that there will be some major renovations, and that would be 1050 may or may not be market value at the time, but it's going to be at a lesser rate than the main floor. We've asked for 25% vacancy. This is a vacant building. It was built in the 60s. It was even at the end of his life, it was open sporadically, not all the time. It's been vacant for 4 years as we sit here today. There was as I indicated earlier, there was a proposal and offered a lease from a local funeral operative, and they were looking at redeveloping the building. That fell through, and subsequent to that, a fitness club may even have it under contract. I think they're in their due diligence, but they're looking at the building. The building is completely gutted because there's nothing, it's a shell. There's nothing that was determined of any value on the redevelopment as well, and it's been gutted. So it does have a history of vacancy. And restaurants, I'm remiss when I see 3% as a model generating that for restaurants. That doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just me. So I'm asking for 25%, 350 shortfall rate. We want the 5, or would like the 5%. We believe that there are costs incurred. I've got a rebuttal brief on the 5% non-recoverable. I won't bore anybody with it, but I'm requesting it. And we started with a 9% cap rate. I've adjusted that to 8%, which ties into the board, and that 629 becomes 708,562. So the real statement of issues is that we disagree with the vacancy at 3% in this unique situation. We also believe that this is mass appraisal, and common sense tells us that the rate of 3% does not seem appropriate, and there's no foundation for it in the assessor's brief. So I'm asking the board to consider the 1250. We looked at the comps that were provided by the assessor. The only one that I found that bears any resemblance, except they have no second floor, is Sushi Jam at 1250 a square foot. We've got 1250 on our brief as well. So I respectfully submit an 8% cap rate with 56,685 NOI would be 708,562. If you flip to the next page, we're looking at lease comps. Again, I looked at at our comps. I looked at the city comps, and I don't think either one of us have comps that have a second floor, so they're all 12.5 seems reasonable to me. These are just an assortment of retail and restaurants, and they work up to $11.71. But again, this building needs some work. You can't just lease it tomorrow and move in there. You have to somebody is going to have to spend some money just to provide to get occupancy. So that's my presentation. I wanted to get the management fee in at this hearing, and we also disagreed with the vacancy. So our issues are vacancy and management, and that's what gives rise to our assessment of 708,562. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colatriglio, any questions for the applicant?
I do have questions. So it primarily revolves around the evidence that was submitted for the 2020 assessment appeal. Mr. Story, you understand that the reference date is still April 1st of 2018, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when you were putting evidence in for the 2020 assessment appeal, that would still be based on the April 1st of 2018, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Now, the NOI that you presented for the 2020 assessment appeal was $64,718. Is that correct?
It sounds reasonable. See, I've got 64,014. The NOI, pardon me, the NOI. No, I've got, this is 2022. I don't have the 2020 with me, I don't think.
Okay.
But I'll accept that number if that's the number you got. That's reasonable.
Right. And if we look at the board's order that's in my brief, you can see that the order itself is based on the applicant NOI and an 8% cap rate. If you take the 64,718 and you divide it by the cap rate, you get the 809 rounded. So that's how the board order is calculated.
Yes.
So you agree that your methodology in evaluating the property has changed between 2020 and 2022? Like it's still an income value, but you've approached.
It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
We didn't get what we thought was appropriate for market rent or for the vacancy, and we didn't think it was appropriate that we didn't get the management fee. And so that's for this appeal.
Right. So, right. I got you. So, but you understand that when the board orders, based on your NOI that was submitted for the 2020 hearing,
Mm-hmm.
that it contemplates any of the adjustments that you made at that time, right? So the 809 in part is.
We're allowed to have a different workup methodology. We're not bound by it forever.
No. I that's you're not bound by it, absolutely. But I'm getting you to recognize that you have changed your position on the vacancy, on the overall rent. Management, you've still applied 5%, but between the two hearings, like in the original assessment hearing for 2020, you used a rent of $1,250 for the total area of the 7,455 square feet. You're not doing that today, correct?
No, because
Right.
circumstances have changed in the interim. There's been some demolition done. There's some permits applied for.
Okay, but all of that is like physical changes are as of January 1st of 2022, but we're talking about some of these market conditions, vacancy, management allowances, expense allowances, stuff like that. That's still all of April 1st of 2018, correct?
Yes, we believe that the board may have erred in not recognizing the management or an appropriate vacancy rate.
Okay, but if the board has used your NOI from the previous hearing, they have allowed management and they have allowed 15% vacancy, correct?
Well, you said that, I didn't. You said that.
Right. But
Mr. Assessor, I think we understand where you're going. Maybe we could move on.
Yeah, sure. That was kind of the basis of my questions. I will point out one thing in regards to the comments about the windows. It does appear that your photo on page 1 is more current. You'll note that the octagon windows have been removed, and you have new windows both on the upper level and the main floor.
Okay. Yes, I see the. Yep.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, that's it for my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Hutchings, questions for the applicant?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Story, I'm looking on your workup, and I'm seeing a value of $629,829, and yet you've revised it to $708,562.
Yes.
Is that what you're asking for?
I took the cap rate from 9 down to 8.
Okay.
Increased the value to 708,562. The reason is that when we went into it, as the assessor just confirmed, there is very little information on cap rates on restaurants. We had some cap rate numbers, Forks and 9%. There's a few others. So we were at 9%. We had very little to hang our hat on, but the decision is 8%. So I used 8% and reduced it.
Okay, and that's based on your NOI of 56,685 capped at 8%. Is that correct?
8.5, correct, sir.
Okay. My next question is: have you visited the property?
Yeah, many times.
Okay. Is it currently for sale or lease?
It's for lease. Well, they've got the sign says available. It doesn't say for sale or lease. And my understanding is that there's a fitness club that are doing their due diligence right now, and that would be a purchase.
Okay. Have you visited the property inside recently?
Not since it got shelled. It's a shell now. So I was there.
Okay. Is it current?
And that.
So it's let's call it a blank canvas ready for somebody to do what they want with it. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a shell. They're buying it as a shell, and they'll put in everything they want to accommodate their specific needs.
Okay, and is it,
And if they're happy and can get permits and COVID passes, a bunch of ifs if you've got a health club nowadays. But if these things all work to their advantage, there's a potential sale there.
okay, and so is it it's for sale or is it being leased?
It's called available, and that means it's either for sale or for lease.
Okay,
And sign on the second floor window, which has only been in for about 10 days, shows as available, sale or rent. But I understand from the owner that they're going through, that the potential purchasers have it under contract and are going through their due diligence. So it'll likely be sold and redeveloped, not as a restaurant, because you would have to install lifts and things of that nature, move food up and down. And it was formerly a banquet room, and they did some buffets up there. But it
so that's been also, so the Marigold restaurant with the kitchen and everything, that's all been stripped out?
all gone.
All gone?
Yeah.
And is it an interior entrance, interior access to the second floor, or is it an exterior?
Interior. Because as you come in the main doors, you go up a flight of stairs. It sort of would greet you when you open the front doors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for many years. It was it's called Birch Cove, I believe, and it operated from Jim French owned it, and it operated as a banquet hall.
Okay, so
For 25 years.
so you say you've been in there recently, is that correct?
I would say 6 months ago.
Okay, so was it stripped out and then re-insulated and re-drywalled on the inside completely, or?
It was stripped out. I believe it is now, but I haven't been in the last month or two. That's about 6 months ago.
They were re-drywalling and rewiring and new electrical.
They were gutting when I was there. They were just pulling stuff out.
So new electrical, new heating system, plumbing, everything had been redone before the drywalling?
Well, it would have to, but I don't know what status they were at. I wasn't really looking at that. Was going in just to see what the status of it was.
Well, one would assume if they re-drywalled that they would have done all that work before they put the new drywall on.
They'd have to, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, and
So
the assessor indicated that there was a new roof put on. Have you any knowledge of that?
I don't. They may very well. I don't know of it. They would have taken permits if they,
okay. So do you know what the permits are and whether they've been completed?
No, I'm not aware that there were permits. Mr. Valtriglio mentioned there were permits. I hadn't seen them.
Okay. All right. And it's currently available. And what is the, and I'm just trying to get at the condition of the property. What is the asking lease rate on that property?
I think it's negotiable. I don't think there's a quoted rate because it'll all depend what requirements they have because you can't just move in. So
okay,
I don't know what it is.
The owner is willing to do some improvements to be negotiated with the new tenant. Is that right?
Yes, he bought it with the intention of a particular use for it,
okay,
which was the 2-level because you can put a display room on the second floor for urns and caskets and whatnot, and you can do services on the main and second floor.
okay.
So it was bought for that purpose, but the funeral operator backed out.
Okay.
It's something else. It went somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions.
I thank you. Mr. Harden, questions for the applicant?
Did the owner appeal the previous decision?
In which, sir?
Did the owner appeal the 2020 decision?
Yes, that's why we're here.
I think he meant further to the municipal board, Mr. Story.
Board, yes.
No, I don't think we don't believe we did.
Okay. Is it? I guess you said it's gutted. It's a shell.
Shell now, it's because the interior demising walls have been removed.
Okay, and that was to open up the space?
Yeah, makes it just a shell, and it can be used by a funeral operator, or it's a fitness club that's actually looking at it now.
Okay, and just for clarity then, are the sort of kitchen area, is that gone?
It's all gone. Yeah, the kitchen was downstairs
Okay,
on the main floor.
that's gone. So if a restaurant came in and said we wanted to lease this spot, but there wouldn't be any particular reason for a restaurant to lease it without a kitchen?
Well, you wouldn't, because one of the issues here is that the only reason that the building has any value as a restaurant is if it has parking. And proximity parking is also important because you're coming out onto a back lane at night, even to go across the back lane. So parking is a bit of a challenge for the building.
Yeah.
Well, as a restaurant use.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you. I have no questions for Mr. Story. Desire for a summation, Mr. Caldruel?
No, I think it's good with what I've presented.
Thank you. Mr. Story?
No, I'm fine, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I have a 3-minute break?
Sure, let's make that a 10-minute break.
Okay.
So I will call a recess for 10 minutes.
Okay, it's 2:00, right?
It's 2:00.
Thank you.
We'll resume at 2:10, please.
Okay. Oh, 2:10. It's 10 to 2 now, I think. Is it not?
No, it's 2. Yep,
2:00.
2:10's good.
Okay.
Okay, I will call the hearing back to order. And we'll deal with the next property on the docket, that being 1500 Plessis. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you, please.
Yep, not a problem. So file number 21-366, the applicant Fairtax Realty Associates or Advocates. The roll number is 0400-726-1540, the civic address 1500 Plessis Road, and the owner Park City Commons JV Limited. Roll year under appeal 2022 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal is $8,851,000 as ordered by the Board of Revision, stemming from the 2020 appeal application for this subject property. The current parcel usage is a neighborhood shopping center, 2 buildings with 6 premises total, 1 story for both buildings. Actual year built varying between 2018 and 2019. So this is very new inventory within the city of Winnipeg. Metal frame construction, and the zoning is commercial mixed use CMU zoning. Total land area, 230,078 square feet. The total leasable area of this property, 39,059 square feet. So there is no recommendation to make a further change to the value, but I will note that the original value that was under appeal for 2020 was $9,182,000. That was reduced by the board to $8,851,000. And if you are looking at my brief, I believe, no, I did not put a copy of that order into the brief. But if you're looking at that order, it was based on the recommendation that I had presented at that time. If you flip to page 2 of the brief, because the property is new, we don't have prior to reference date income and expense questionnaires or information. So that's been redacted from the brief. There's no sales history and no subject leases that are found that would be applicable to the April 1st, 2018 reference date. If you go to page 3 of the brief, you'll see a map view and an aerial view. Again, because the property is so new, The aerial imagery is in fact dated. The building was not put up yet. You can see that they started grading the site for the no frills and the 4-unit CRU that's there. And that's currently what's there. There's a supermarket, it's a no frills grocery store, and then there's a 4-unit CRU located on the as a pad site along Plessis Road. So if you flip to page 4, you'll see some photos from when I was on site at the property in the lead up to the 2020 assessment appeal. So the first picture is the front of the No Frills grocery store, and then the 4 CRU strip mall or strip is shown on the second photo. And I'll note that the end unit Starbucks there has a drive-through that wraps around the building. And it's the only unit that has that feature, is that end cap. If you go to page 5 of the brief, you'll see that I've provided some rental comparables. I'll note that there is a tenant name that ought to have been redacted at the bottom of page 5. Typically, we don't show the tenant names, so that one's on me. But the rental range that we're looking at, I've kind of provided, it's all lumped in as one table, but the range in regards to the grocery store portions from $14.25 up to $17.25. And that's the larger premises that you see, 36,000, 42,000, 39,000. Those are the leases that reference the grocery store portion. The remainder of these reference the retail and restaurant usage within that 4 CRU strip. And I'll highlight a few of these. I think when you look at, actually, I'll go first to the city workup. So if you go to page 7, you'll see the income value that was presented as a recommendation at the 2020 appeal for this property. $40 was used on the end cap unit of that strip. It does have a higher rent than the other units within that strip due to the additional amenity of the drive-through. And that premium was determined based on a review of comparables of similar type end cap units on a strip that had a drive-through, mainly for the purposes of having a coffee shop as the tenant. The remainder of these are just your typical CRU, no drive-through. So that's the first 4 premises you see there. $40 for the end cap with the drive-through, $30.32 for the 1,440 square foot unit, $30 for the 1,032 square foot unit, $28 for the 2,219 square foot unit. The grocery store has a rental rate of $15.08 applied. That's a modeled rate for the grocer, 30,869 square feet. And then there's a storage office retail mezzanine area that's 1,732 square feet. And that is tagged with a rate of $7.52. So the total potential rent here is $685,963. The vacancy allowance for neighborhood shopping center modeled 4%, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, and shortfall at $8 a square foot to arrive at a net operating income $632,855. The overall capitalization rate applied by the model for neighborhood shopping centers of this age and size, 7.15%. So total capitalized value rounded at $8,851,000. So again, this matches the recommendation that was presented at the 2020 appeal for this property. with the same reference date. Page 8 of the brief is just a summary of that same income workup. Page 9 is our cap rate table. Now, for the neighborhood shopping centers, we do show both the low and the high, as well as the 20th and 80th percentile based on city data, and then we show some outside sources. So low end being 6.15, high end being 9.40, the 20th percentile being 7.15, and the 80th percentile being 7.30. So you'll see that the majority of the data between the 20th and 80th percentile falls within this kind of range, 7.15 to 7.30. Now, given the age of the property, understandable to think that this would come in at the lower end of that range for the cap rate. Colliers does not appear to have published rates for neighborhood shopping, and neither does Cushman and Wakefield, but CBRE does for Q1 2018. And they have for neighborhood shopping center a range of on the low end 6.50 for cap rates to a high of 7.0%. So we're in at 7.15, a bit higher than CBRE would suggest, but right within the range that we would expect from the City of Winnipeg data. Page 10 has just some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and page 11 through to the back of the brief is our standard reassessment cycle addenda package. So I won't cover that. But basically, today I'm asking that the board confirm the value and maintain the value that was ordered during the 2020 appeal at $8,851,000. That's my presentation. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions for the assessor?
Yes, please. The no frills is no frills. It's just basically forward shell, and they move in for, there's no amenities that would be typical of a grocery store, such as Safeway or a Sobeys, or which would be deli department, bakery, butcher. Some even have more services. But you're aware that the No Frills has no amenities?
Yep.
Okay. If you can just look for a moment at your comps, page 5. You have one here, 1385 McPhillips, $40 a square foot. I presume you know that's a Tim Hortons. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. That's also an end cap of a strip. That's a Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
And that's got the $40 rate. Also new inventory as well. Built 2016. Are you
aware that it's owned, that particular Tim Hortons is owned by the Martins family, who also own the shopping center?
No, I was not aware of that.
So the $40, we don't know if it's an arm's length lease or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of it, so I haven't had the chance to investigate that further. But
well, that's the case, but that's fine. Okay, and then as we come down to near the end of the brief, or of the comparables, 7 Rendiers, and it's a Sobeys. We all know that. It's a full service Sobeys. It's got 23-foot ceiling heights. It's 36,000 square feet, so it's just slightly larger than the subject, correct?
Correct.
And that's $14.25, but that's a fully equipped store with coolers and built-ins, and many more built-ins in the subject property.
Correct. Yeah, and it's also a much older lease as well, right? It's a 2008 lease.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also the next one, which is 965 Henderson Highway, is also a Sobeys, and it's got again full service. It's got a deli, it's got a bakery, it's got a meat shop, it's even got a pharmacy, as a matter of fact. The subject doesn't have a pharmacy, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
And that rate is $16 a square foot. It's got a 16-foot ceiling height, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that's the of the 3 grocery stores that are there. That is the newest lease, and it's the newest building of the bunch.
Yes, and $16 seems like should be the right number if you're looking at our position is that the market rent for no frills is in the range of $13. And if this is in close proximity, but let's just go a little further. Let's go to 2575 Main Street. That's also a Sobeys, correct?
Correct.
So 3 Sobeys in your summary here. $17.25, $16, and $14.25 market rent. Right?
$17.25 market rent.
I'm sorry, what are you saying? 17? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 17.25.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to page 7, and on your page 7, you have the $40 rate, which is Starbucks,
That's correct.
and $28 rate on which one that is. Okay, passing that. And those would be my questions. I'm fine with questions.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Hutchings, questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, any building permit values or land acquisition history on this property?
No, not that I looked at. Frankly, when you're looking at an income workup for the property, the land value never comes into play in the valuation for an income workup.
Okay.
So no, I mostly stuck to the market rents, and mostly new inventory because it's newer. This is 2018, 2019 build. I tried to stick to that in regards to comparables, but it is difficult on grocery stores. There isn't a whole lot of brand new grocery stores that were able to be used for the reference date here of April 1st of 2018. So there were some challenges in finding some of the comparables for that.
Thank you. Would you mind, I'm getting an average potential rent on the total square footage of about $17.56 a square foot. Is that what you've got there?
Let me have a quick look.
Okay.
So you're talking about 39,059 square feet.
Yeah.
And I have, 685,963 divided by 39,059. Somehow that went wonky on me. 39,059. Yeah, about 1756 if you were going to round it to the penny.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And my last question, just to confirm, this is the brief that you presented at the 2020 hearing, and I think your words were that that board of revision accepted your valuation at that time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So the only thing that was changed in regards to this brief versus the previous brief is the file number, the hearing date, and the roll year that's shown on the first page and the value under appeal. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harden, questions for the assessor?
I guess just one. So it was actually a full decision of the board and not an accepted recommendation by the applicant, was it?
Yeah, so what I show as the order type is that the assessment and tax department recommendation was accepted and that the applicant was present. I don't believe that the applicant was accepting the recommendation at that time. So I think the board accepted it, but I don't believe Mr. Story did.
Okay.
But I'll also note that the 2020 board order to reduce the value from 9,182,000 to 8,851,000 was not appealed further by either party to the municipal board.
Okay, that answers one question I was going to have for the applicants. So thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. So this income workup that you have, I'm assuming it's not model driven then, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the model edition originally came in at the $9,182,000 mark. When I did my review for the preparation of the 2020 appeal, I made some changes to some of the rents, and that's why you're seeing a different value for my recommendation. At the time, it amounted to just under $400,000, $300,000 reduction. And yeah, at this time, I'm not looking to change that position.
Right. So that would account for why there's not an economy of scale on a couple of the CRUs.
Yeah, that's correct. And it also, if you're looking at the recommendation, the premium that I've applied on the rent for the end unit with the drive-through, that's also a decision that was made by myself based on a review of comparables specific to that. Now, in the brief, you only see the one, and there's been some questions about who the party involved were, but I also did rely, and it's not shown in the brief here, on another comparable, and that was Unit 200, 1715 Plessis. That was a 2014 lease of a Tim Hortons end cap as well, and that was also $41. So that was kind of where, when I looked specific to that type of unit, end cap, drive through, that's how I arrived at that.
Okay, the unit that's 1,440 square feet is $30.32 per square foot rent. I'm assuming that's a model rent?
Yeah, that's I for whatever reason, I don't know why I didn't put that one. I let the model go through on that one, and as well as the two grocery store premises, but the other ones that are flat numbers, those are overrides. Okay.
So that may have just been an oversight on your part, leaving the...
Yeah, it might have just been close enough that $30 probably would have been fine. So I just left it at the modeled rate.
I see. Okay, I thank you. Mr. Story, when you're ready, we'll hear from you, please.
If you go to page 4 of our brief, you'll see what our suggested market rents are, $13 and $6.50 for the mezzanine, no frills base floor, plus a 1,700 square foot mezzanine at $6.50, which is half the rate. Starbucks, Mutual Burrito, Pizza Hut, Pet Value, 5% vacancy. We've asked for the 5% non-recoverable costs. That's part of the reason we're here today. And a cap rate of 7.5%. For an assessment of $6,731,000. The next page is the decision that Mr. Carl Triglio was mentioning. There's two of them, because there's stuff in there. Page 6 is the actual, it takes it from 9.1 down to 8.851. This is a summary of the information provided to the assessment department to give you an idea of challenges that you have with coming up with market rent on these shopping centers, particularly in these times. You'll see that the first one, which is a no-frill, Loblaws is a no-frills. And the tenant was given 3.5 million in inducement from the owner and built the store themselves. They built the store for 3.5. So that's a challenge of what is proper market rent for. These are unique situations. Starbucks, the TI was 48,000, and I'm not asking for anything to do with TIs. I just want you to see that it's not easy to determine what a fair market rent is on these properties. On that small Starbucks, it's 1,767 square feet, and the tenant allowance is $27 a square foot, 48,000. Mucho Burrito is 21,000. Pizza Hut, there's none, and Pet Planet. That just gives you a little bit of background on the property. This property, I'm going to move on from it. This is one of our comparables, but it's, I'll just ask the board to ignore it for now, and I'll come back to it. Yeah, this is a food store. We tried to find a food store, albeit much newer, in a different location. But Lucky's is on Winnipeg, 1051. It's on page 10. And they're assessed with an 8.5 cap. They get the 5%. And they have a market rate of $14.90 plus the, based on the assessment. That was reduced to $8.50 and $5, the market rent. If you go to the next page, there's a series of different retail, neighborhood shopping center, and they range anywhere from $13.50 to $28 to Mongo Grill. And next, I just included this because this is the want the board to be aware that this is the which we've had conversations with the assessor. This is McPhillips, which we're doing next. I have some rebuttal. Is there any problem with rebuttal being?
What are you rebutting, Mr. Story?
Just rebutting the rate on Starbucks. Starbucks rate to 40. We're suggesting it should be 36.
Have you seen the rebuttal evidence yet, Mr. Assessor?
I have not.
Okay, maybe we could just take a moment and see whether there's any objections on the assessor's part before we submit that, Mr. Story.
Sure, no problem.
Just give me one moment. I'm going to try to get this to load up. Looks like it came through, so I'll get this open. Okay. It looks like there's just a bunch of different comparables. Is there anything targeted to that specific?
No, just establishing a range, and we can speak to the the food service ones, there's Daly's Food, Sun Fortune, Lucky's Market on Jefferson, IGA. There's Render's Mall has a Sobeys.
So, Mr. Story, are you actually going to be introducing new evidence, or
No, I don't.
is this rebutting something that the assessor has presented?
Well, it's rebutting the value that the assessor uses in determining his market rate.
I'm not seeing anything targeted to that specific rent. It looks like it's just a wide variety of comparables.
So are you objecting to the rebuttal, Mr. Assessor?
I am objecting to it.
Okay, perhaps what we should do then, we'll take a short recess while the board considers whether rebuttal evidence should be submitted at this point. So, Gary, if we could.
Just so you understand, my concern is that there is nothing specifically targeted to that one premise, and I'm not seeing anything that would have an end unit with a drive-through that's in here. It looks like just a wide variety of comparables. So that's kind of my issue with it.
May I comment?
You may.
You'll see in the rebuttal that there's a KFC and an A&W on the site, and they too have drive-throughs. You can see that. And
these are standalone restaurants, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So a little different.
I don't know why, but okay. Did you differentiate in your comms as to standalone?
Just one moment, please, Mr. Story. Kara, are we still hearing, or are we in recess?
No, we're still streaming.
Okay, we're still streaming. Perhaps, Mr. Story, if you just wanted to do this through questioning, is that something that would be acceptable to you?
Yes. Yes, that'd be acceptable. Is that how you'd like me to do it? Proceed that way?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
please.
Mr. Colatrigio, the KFC is a different roll number, but it's part of the same Park Commons shopping center. Is that correct?
I would have to look. It may be.
Or you're familiar with the KFC? You're familiar with the other sites, so you're not?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that KFC has a drive-through?
I believe so, yep.
And it's not an end cap, it's standalone.
That's a standalone, yep. That's correct. And to your other question about whether I've differentiated in my comparables, there's only one standalone fast food that's included, and that's the Jollibee at 1377 McPhillips.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gentlemen, bear in mind that the board does not have the evidence that, or the properties.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, I got you.
Perhaps, Mr. Story, you can ask the assessor his knowledge of a particular property, a particular address, and he can answer based on that.
Well, you'll acknowledge that KFC and A&W have drive-through. Is that
Yep.
fair?
Yep, that's fair.
Okay, and Mr. Coltrane, did you look at the No Frills store in McIver Mall in your analysis?
I did not. It's attached to a mall, which is a little different than the standalone arrangement on Plessis. I did note that your brief had some of the information from that property, from McIver Mall. But I'll add the comment that some of the lease information that's there is prior to any renovations that were done and prior to the conversion to the no frills that's currently there. So that's where you see on your brief on page, I guess 13, the rent roll, the location that you're referencing, it's the old marketplace, but the lease is prior to it being converted there and renovated.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was 850 square foot, and they had 20,000
Yeah.
square feet. And Marketplace actually vacated the mall. And this is a new tenant when Loblaws came in, but Loblaws are paying $850 a square foot.
That's not in the brief though, correct?
That's what?
That lease information or that rent roll, that's not shown in the brief.
It's shown in this, but it should have been in the brief. I thought it was. It's showing here in the page 6 of the rebuttal. It's Marketplace. It's 50.
Mr. Story, we're not dealing with a rebuttal. We're dealing still with questions, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll say is that based on the piece that's in the brief on page 13, as of it's actually post reference as of 04/30/2018, the rent roll here. This is the marketplace. It's not the Loblaws lease for no frills. This is the old marketplace prior to the renovations there.
I'm
at 850. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that.
Okay. No, that's. But there's no lease that shows the no frills there, correct?
No, because it was Marketplace at the reference date.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, those would be mine. And we've also got our non-recoverable expense submission, which I've attached it with the rebuttal, but hopefully we all are aware of it and waiting for a decision. So I think I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hutchings, questions for the assessor?
If I could figure out where we are.
I think it's questions for the applicant, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. The applicant gave his evidence, so.
Did we, Mr. Chair, did we settle about the rebuttal yet, or?
Yeah, we did.
So we're allowing verbal question?
We're allowing verbal questioning on that. Yes, correct.
Oh, and so the assessor, copy of that rebuttal, is that correct?
Yeah,
Sorry?
I did get a copy. Yep.
But we don't, right?
We do not have a copy of that. No.
Okay. All right. So Mr. Story is doing it in the way of questioning the assessor.
Correct.
Okay. So is it? Am I asking?
I'm sorry. I guess it's actually Mr. Colatruglio has the opportunity to question Mr. Story. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Assessor, did you have questions for the applicant?
Let's quickly take a look. The grocery store rents, Sid, is there specific comparables you used? I know that there's a bunch of different rent roll extracts and there's a table on page 23. Is that kind of the table on page 23? Is that the summary of the comparables that are being used?
No, what we did is we looked at the best comparable we could find, which was in close proximity, which is Rendiers. It's same target market, which is east end of the city, Transcona. And we adjusted it for the quality of finish, the nature of the business, and felt that 13 was an appropriate rent for the size, the ceiling height, and that the best comparable we had was the Sobeys next door. There are 3 Sobeys listed, and but the Rendiers is closest to the subject.
Okay, and that's based on my brief, correct?
Yes, and we also did extensive, which we didn't put in the brief, but I'll speak to it quickly. We also did traffic count analysis, And we looked at traffic counts in similar neighborhood shopping centers, different parts of the city, trying to not to lose sight of the fact that this is Transcona, it's on Plessis. It has relatively low traffic counts. Hopefully with the development that's happening, that will increase. Their mixed use properties will be apartments and whatnot. So we looked at that. We relied heavily on best comparisons, and Sobe seems to be the best comparison.
Okay.
That's
Now,
confirmed by
yep.
your information. And
Yep.
it works out to a median of $16. If Sobeys is paying 16, No Frills should pay 13 or less, in my opinion. But that's just
right. But and those buildings are all much older than the No Frills that's located on Plessis, correct?
I don't know. Rendiers is, I've been doing Rendiers for many, many years. It's a pretty attractive shopping center.
Okay.
There's a new Dave's in there, Famous Days. There's some new tendencies.
Gotcha. And then in regards to the comments about the Lucky Supermarket, is that being used as a comparable? Like, I don't see any.
The idea of that was to put in, so you would see that in some of these various locations, Linden Ridge, Pembina Village, St. Vital Square, et cetera, the rates are all over the place. And the food,
Okay.
the food is particularly, the Lucky Supermarket is $8.50 a square foot is a market rent. And
Okay.
on Jefferson there's one on Jefferson. There's two of them. Yeah, just found the best comps we could. We started looking at square footage and then location.
Gotcha. Now, location plays a big factor, right? And it's further to the comments of the traffic counts and that it's obviously of importance where the property is located. I guess what I'm asking is the comparable on Rendiers is equivalent or better in regards to traffic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, one of the highest traffic counts in the city of Winnipeg is the corner of Nairn and 59 Highway.
Okay.
And it's a high, very high. It's more than twice the traffic count that you would have on Plessis.
Right. Now, the Plessis location is, or I guess the Renders location is surrounded mostly by commercial usage, correct?
Some residential going west. Yeah, that's heavy density going west.
Right. Okay. And then in regards to Plessis, there's been a lot of new condominiums and apartments that have popped up around this Park City Commons development. And that would help to drive traffic to the grocery store. And
the reason they're getting these rates is the business plan, and 2 of the 7 are built, is to have 7 apartment complexes in and around these sites. And
That's right.
that will feed in due course when they get built. But right now, one of the apartments is finished and one is nearing completion. But there'll be 7 when it's all done. And that's what these folks take into consideration when they sign leases.
Gotcha. And to the east of that, it's all single family usage on the east side of Plessis, right?
On the east side of Plessis, there's also a lot of, on the east side of Plessis, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just across from the No Frills.
Yeah.
It's all a single family neighborhood there, residential, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So Plessis serves to kind of route traffic from that neighborhood. You either go to Plessis or you go all the way down to the other side before you hit a main road, right?
Yeah.
Like
Plessis
is kind of the big.
Asked something about location, and if you had any information on the transaction, this property was the city works yard and was purchased from the city of Winnipeg. That's the background, and then this multi-use development was contemplated, and that's coming to fruition. But it's still Plessis. It's not Rendiers. It's not Henderson Highway. It's not McPhillips. And
right.
all of those are much, much higher traffic counts.
Right. And in regards to the rents themselves, further up Plessis, 1750 Plessis, similar neighborhood shopping center, little bit older than what we're looking at here today. It's 2013 versus 2018 and 19. But the new inventory there typically is attracting higher rents than what you would see for older inventory, correct? You would agree with that?
Because of the growth, because of Park Commons and others, 1750 trades off Park Commons, and Park Commons trades off 1750.
Right.
That's what the synergies are.
Okay, so that would be like that property is a good comparable then to this property.
Well, in terms of if someone were to look at without any financial information on the cost of construction and whatnot, I think that they would feel a market rent is what the location justifies. And
Okay.
that's based on traffic count, that's based on amount of development. Remember that 1,500 pluses were city works yards 3 or 4 years ago. So
Right.
big transition.
Okay. I have no further questions.
I thank you. Mr. Hutchings, now, yes, we question the applicant, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, Mr. Story, I'm looking on page 8 of your presentation. It's a 2019 board decision. I'm wondering what
That was a comparable to show that we put in that a food store, same square footage roughly, 29,000. I think that's Lucky's Supermarket.
Okay, but why is it 2019 with a different reference date relevant? Am I wrong here? Is this a 2020 appeal or?
Oh, it looks like a 2020.
Yes,
Okay.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like a 2020.
Okay, and then next page 10. Lucky Supermarket showing
The analysis of the decision.
2019 rate. How is that? Should that be 2020 rate?
Yes, 2020. I'm sorry.
Is that 2019 and 20?
Yes, 2020.
Okay. Okay, and then we've got next page 1715 Keniston, a 2016 assessment. Where does that fit in today?
Which page, sir? Which page?
You're at page 11.
These are rent rolls.
Okay, but from
I'm sorry, yeah. That's
From-
also here.
how is that relevant in this hearing today?
It's not strike there.
Okay. Okay, and then we've got McPhillips 2019 model, it says at the bottom, but that's 2020. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. I was just a bit confused where the relevance of some of this evidence presented.
We used most of our brief that we used before, and we had more detail on comparables.
Okay.
I shouldn't have shortened.
So where is your workup for the value you're asking for?
That is on our page 4, because we had some confusion in reconciling the decision at first. But this is what we're requesting. $13, our real basis for 2 points. One is to be a $13 rate that we use comparables, mostly Sobeys, particularly on Rendeers, and also the 5%. So they're the 2 issues that we're questioning this hearing.
So you're asking for, let's see, your NOI is 504,853 as opposed to the assessor at 632,855. Okay. And then your cap rate is 7.5% and the assessor. So you're actually higher than the assessor. He's saying 7.15%.
Yes.
Okay. But your final number estimate of value is $6,731,000 rounded. Okay. Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Harden, questions for the applicant?
Okay, how did you arrive at your cap rate of 7.5?
We use the reporting agencies. We rely where we can on the city. But I think that the 7.5 was a number that was probably adjusted upwardly because of what is pending, what was in the future for retail. We thought retail, we feel that's an appropriate cap rate for retail. There's a lot of talk before COVID of challenge to bricks and mortar retail and that everybody would have to rethink it. We kind of lost focus of that and worried more about COVID. But either one of them are imposing. But that's how that was determined. It was basically risk associated with the industry.
Okay, if you look at your page 5, there was I guess a supplemental assessment for 2019 was at $6,731,000. And so you're saying there should be no change between the supplemental 2019 and the 2020 two assessments?
So we're looking at the decision at $8,851,000.
No, on page 5, there was the 2019 supplemental.
Yes, and then 220 is number page 6.
Yeah, but I'm asking about page 5, that the value, the 2019 value is exactly equal to the number you're proposing for the 2022 value.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Just a little clarification on the rents that you've used on your workup, Mr. Story. They just wonder where those numbers come from. They're usually don't see numbers that specific. You usually see like, rounded dollars or 50 cents or something like that.
Yes.
But these are quite specific. I just wonder where you came up with those numbers.
They would have come from the assessment department when we did the other hearing, perhaps, I'm not sure. The only two that we were concerned about, or mostly concerned about, is the $13 and the $6.50. And those are from the marketplace. The others are small, they're under 2,000 square feet, with one exception. And so we accepted I believe these came from the assessor's initial brief, but I may be wrong.
I can maybe add some insight
Yeah.
to that. That may have been from the 2019 briefs that were submitted. I don't have it with me, but it's certainly not from our information that was submitted for 2020, because that was the recommendation that I presented would have been. I can't say with certainty because I don't have the 2019 brief on me, but I know it's not from our 2020 brief.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Okay, and otherwise the vacancy you're saying should be 5% versus I believe the assessor said 4%. Is that just a market?
We were using 5% on vacancy, mass appraisal for retail, 5 and 6%. So that's where we got that. That's we use 4% there and 3% somewhere else.
Okay. I thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay.
Desire for a summation, Mr. Colatruglia?
Yeah, just to clarify that it is the board ordered value that's under appeal, and that we're asking for the board to maintain that value.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Story. Or desire for
fine, thank you.
Thank you. bring us to our final property today, which is 1399 McPhillips. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Perfect. Just give me one moment to make sure I have the briefs loaded
May I
up.
have 1 moment as well, 2 minutes?
Okay, we
Yep.
will take a,
No problem.
we will take a 5-minute break here, please.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I'm doing some medication and I have to deal with it.
That's fine. We'll do a 5-minute. Thank you. Thank you. I will call the hearing back to order. And we'll deal with the last property on the docket today, which is 1399 McPhillips. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 21-353, the applicant Fairtax Realty Advocates, roll number 1104-068-2000, and the civic address of 1399 McPhillips Street. This is Northgate Shopping Center, formerly Northgate Mall. The owner is 285-1351 Manitoba Limited, and the roll year under appeal 2022 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal is $36,313,000. This is a board ordered value ordered from the 2020 appeal for this property. The current parcel usage is as a neighborhood shopping center. This property has gone through a significant conversion / renovation / new construction on site. I guess prior to the conversion it was an enclosed mall that was demalled essentially. But prior to the conversion, the property is best described as a community shopping center, masonry steel frame construction. The anchor was originally constructed in 1962 and renovated in 1997. The remainder of the building constructed in 1986 and 1997. Subject building located on the east side of McPhillips Street, north of Inkster, on C4 zoned land. And the zoning has not changed since then. Post conversion, the subject is best described as a neighborhood shopping center with multiple buildings of various ages. The former mall is a large strip style development anchored by a grocery store, Save On Foods, and a movie theater, Cinema City. The parking lot is home to multiple pad site developments, including a standalone fast food restaurant with a drive-through. This is the Jollibee. A 2 CRU strip development that houses a Booster Juice and a Loaded Brogy, and a 7 CRU strip with drive-throughs on both end units, Tim Hortons and a Dairy Queen for the end units with the drive-throughs. So the buildings that are encompassed in this roll number, 1385 McPhillips. This is the 7 CRU strip along McPhillips. That was completed in 2017. 1377, this is a standalone fast food restaurant, also completed in 2017. And the 1379 McPhillips, which is a 2 CRU strip, completed 2017. The Save On Foods, this is a former Zeller's space that was, like I said, with the conversion of the mall and the demalling, was made into, I guess, the Save On Foods. It's a full service. They've got everything in there. They've got a variety of different hot foods that you can get. It's quite a store in regards to grocery stores. I would say above and beyond your average grocery store. And then there's the 7. And then that was opened in November of 2016. So all of this completed kind of well in advance of the April 1st, 2018 reference date. So when we're looking at this property, we're looking at it post-conversion. Everything's been built. Everything's ready to be occupied. The rent roll information that you're seeing in the briefs will reflect a period of time where the property is in transition. And it's not really indicative of a post conversion rent roll or stabilized to the market rent roll. So I'll just note that right out of the gates. But it's a C4 zoning, 640,914 square feet of land area. Total leasable area here is 190,585 square feet. If you go to page 2, you'll see that both of the requests for income and expense information were received. No subject sale history to report. And there's a variety of subject property leases that are shown here on page 2 and 3. Hold on one second. On page 2 and 3. Starting on page 3, you'll see an aerial view of the subject parcel. Page 4 is aerial view with satellite imaging showing the building and the improvements. On the left side of that photo, you'll see the 7 CRU strip. And then you'll see across from the Save On Foods, which is located just south of where it says Defoe Boulevard. There's the Jollibee, which is a standalone, and then the 2-unit CRU that was added there. So it's the former mall space, and then the 3 new buildings that were added are shown here. Page 4, you'll see some street view of the new post renovation. The first few shots are of the old mall space, facing towards McPhillips. Page 6, you'll see the Jollibee restaurant with drive-through. Page 7, you'll see the 7 CRU strip that was developed. And you can kind of see the drive-through for the Dairy Queen on the far side, the right side of the photo, and the drive-through for the Tim Hortons on the left side of the photo. Page 7, you'll see some street view photos of the Save On Foods grocery store. I'll skip over the comparables for now, but I will come back to them. If you skip to page 10 of the brief, you'll see the income workup for this property. The model has quite the range in regards to different tenant classes and sizes. To summarize briefly, it's a total of 190,000 square feet, 195,85 square feet. Total potential rent there, $3,181,087. Market vacancy has been applied to the property for this valuation, 4%. 2% non-recoverable expense allowance and shortfall at $8 a square foot to arrive at a net operating income of $2,931,780 for the NOI. Overall cap rate 7.3%, and the capitalized value from the model is $40,161,370. So that's higher than the board ordered value that's shown after there, $36,313,000. Now that was not appealed by the city, but it was appealed by the applicant. So that is pending at the municipal board, the 2020. But that is the current value under appeal, $36,313,000. If you flip to, or let's go back to the comparables before I gloss over them. So when I put together this brief, hold on one moment. I want to make sure I'm looking at that. I keep having PDF errors that keep popping up. So just bear with me here. Want to make sure I can cover the. Okay, you guys can still hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Good, I can hear you guys. Okay, so I'll start on page 8. What I tried to do here was show older retail / restaurant Garden City inventory. And I tried to show newer retail / restaurant inventory because of the new buildings here. I think it's important to highlight that the newer inventory does typically drive higher rents. But if you're looking at older inventory, the range is, between $14 up to about $26 a square foot. And if you look at newer inventory, the range between $23 up to as high as $42 a square foot. So there is a very little overlap. The new inventory, without question, drives higher rents. And that's important because there's quite a bit of new inventory on site, but also there's newly renovated inventory on site. Now, anytime you get a big conversion project like this, you're going to have a period of time where the property has not stabilized to the market. I would suggest that 2018 reference date probably still within that stabilization period where this property is now post-renovation and it's trying to attract tenants to fill vacancies at the property. And it's been quite successful to date in filling up the property. But as of the reference date, these are the kind of rents that kind of are an indication of what retail / restaurants would kind of go for. I think it's important to highlight the similarities to 1715 Plessis, 200-1715 Plessis, newer construction there. The rates range from $26 for 10,365 square feet, all the way up to $42 for 3,185 square feet. So quite the range. But your typical units within a strip, like we see at McPhillips in the 7 CRU strip, or the 2 CRU building that were built, is $25 to $36 to $41 for the end cap with the drive-through. So the rates that are applied by the model for those particular premises, if you go back to the workup, in some instances are what I would consider a little bit low. The new inventory, the model has less of a sample size to draw from. And it can sometimes not be as accurate. So in looking at some of the newer premises there, Tim Hortons rent, the model comes in at $35.87. The contract rent's $40. But again, based on the previous discussions about that particular unit, there may be some questions about who the ownership is for that. But I would go back to the 1750 Plessis comparable, and that's at $41. So it may be a little low on some of the new inventory. Another model versus contract to kind of look at is for the standalone standalone fast food restaurant with drive-through. That's the Jollibee. The model has that particular premise in at around $34.65. But if you flip to page 2 of the brief, you'll see that the contract rate for the Jollibee is $41. So we might be a little low on some, we might be a little high on some. That's how the modeling kind of works for some of these, but this is in fact the modeled rates. And then if you go to page 9, I did provide an additional table of supermarket rents, as low as $13 for 50,000 square feet, to as high as $19.25 for 58,654 square feet. And again, because of the extensive renovations that were done at this property, it really did spruce up the space that was existing, and the new space is brand new inventory on the market. So I would say attract higher rents than your typical average inventory, despite the original age of the property. So again, because the value under appeal is the board ordered value, the model does vary. The $40 million, 161,370 that we show as the model value, that's not what's under appeal. We're kind of not seeking an increase here. We're looking to maintain that board ordered value, $36,313,000. Page 12 of the brief, that's just again the income summary. Page 13 of the brief is the capitalization rate table and information. Again, post conversion, this would be considered a neighborhood shopping center. Between the low end and the high end, 6.15% to as high as 9.40%. But again, most of the stuff falling between the 20th and 80th percentile, 7.15% up to 7.30. So quite a tight range for the majority of data that was analyzed by the city, and CBRE between 6.5% and 7% for neighborhood shopping center cap rates. The model has applied a capitalization rate 7.30. So on the higher side at the 80th percentile is kind of where we fall for this particular property. Page 14 is the income and expense questionnaire that was submitted to us by the owner. And included with it is an income statement. Now, the income statement, like I had referenced prior, that's the period of time that covers is January 2017 to December of 2017. So some of the properties that were completed during 2017 hadn't fully come online yet, and we're still in a state of lease up for some of those premises. So it's not very indicative of a stabilized income statement post conversion for this property. So we've tried to stick to the market as instead of diving into the actuals here because of that. It's not a property that we would look to as a benchmark for what the market looks like for April 1st of 2018. It's very much a property that's in the middle of a transition period and post-conversion lease-up period. So it's not quite indicative of market. The rent roll starts on page 21, and you'll note that some of the leases that are in place are very much leases that were signed prior to any of the conversion work taking place. So again, if we're looking at the current physical condition of this property as of the economic reference date of April 1st of 2018, I don't think some of the actual leases bear much weight. Now, some of them certainly do, because they are leases that are in place post conversion and prior to the reference date. And that's specifically referring to the new construction there. Some of the stuff within the old shopping mall, you'll see some of the newer leases, but primarily it's a mixed bag of stuff that's kind of carried over prior and stuff that's signed kind of post renovation at this property. And you'll note that they're able to attract very high rents for the new inventory that's on site. One that I'll point out that is a very dated lease is the Cineplex. It's a lease that starts in 1998, and it's a very, very low rate, $3.05. Certainly not what I would consider market for this type of space. And I think it's highlighted by the fact that if you look at some of the newer space post-conversion and newer leases, you have the Good Life Fitness, 25,326 square feet. That went in at $950 a square foot. That's post-conversion. But again, there's going to be a range. It all depends on location within the mall and exposure and all sorts of stuff. But you'll see that that the newer inventory certainly drives a lot higher rents. So specifically, any unit associated with 1385, when you're looking at the units, if it's a number -1385, that's the strip that's right along McPhillips. 1379, I believe, is the other 2-unit CRU that was put up, and then the Jollibee.
Mark.
Yep.
I'd like to ask Mr. Chair if I could have a couple-minute break.
Yeah, sure.
Stomach's acting up a bit. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Very fast, not even a minute.
No, that's okay.
We won't break, but we will recess without going off stream.
Yep, that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay,
Do I have-
call the hearing back to order. You may continue, Mr. Colatruville.
Okay, so back to the rent roll. I was kind of just scrolling through. I wasn't really giving you guys targeted page numbers or anything. And there is some mix, like the Petro Canada shows up on this rent roll and it's not on the same roll number. So when you guys are just cautioning the board, if you're reviewing this information, take note of what units you're looking at, whether it's new inventory or not. And certainly take note of the lease start date, as it's very important in understanding that the property has undergone a significant change since some of those leases were signed. So just as a note to the board. In regards to the vacancy, certainly the rent roll that I show, and if you go to, you'll see this on page 31 of my brief. You'll see that there are some vacant units that are shown there. And again, this is as of December 31st of 2017. So 4 months prior to the reference date, there is some vacancy. Now, in recent years, the space has continued to fill up. So it is stabilized to the market. But what you're seeing here is a snapshot of the property in very much a transitionary period. So there still is lease up occurring. Time needs to occur for absorption of the inventory to occur. So I would caution against going based on actuals here because it's not really indicative at all of the market. Overall, the market for neighborhood shopping centers is much lower than what's shown there on the rent roll. And again, back to the actual income valuation itself, is it uses the modeled market vacancy, which is 4% for neighborhood shopping centers. Following the rent roll, I believe there, and I don't know if I'll need to really dive into it. I put in a municipal board order. It's not really relevant unless we start diving into adjustments for tenant inducements. And the reason this was included was that part of the discussion or part of the brief for the 2020 appeal did appear to show some rents being reduced by the tenant inducement amount. And that's something that the board typically doesn't accept. So I won't go through the whole thing. If that's not going to get argued today, it's not very relevant to the discussion. But if it does come up, there is a piece of the order that's I feel of most importance. But it's there in full for you guys to read if that's where things go. But it's on page 36 under the heading "The Board's Decision." There's a piece in regards to it's the second paragraph. Board reiterates that tenant inducements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purposes of calculating market value. And they go on to reference some additional board orders. So again, I won't spend a whole lot of time with it, but it's there in full if it comes up. And if you guys need to review it, that's kind of where I've targeted its inclusion. Page 39 is the 2020 appeal, the border revision order. So you'll see that the value was reduced from $40,112,000 to $36,313,000. And the details that the board provides is that the decision is based on a capitalization rate of 7.75 and an adjusted NOI. So I can't speak to the NOI, but they've certainly used a different cap rate than what the model has used. Page 40 is just page 2 of that order. Page 41 is some excerpts of the Municipal Assessment Act, and page 42 to the back is just our standard reassessment, 2020 reassessment addenda package. So at this time, to kind of summarize, we looked at both older inventory and new inventory, but due to the conversion and significant renovation of this property, I would say that the inventory that's there is what I would consider good inventory. And probably requires higher than average rates for what's there. Now, there's some debate on whether the old mall that's been spruced up generates the same kind of rents as the new space. I'm not trying to suggest that. Certainly the brand new builds there are generating the highest amount of rent. But a significant amount of money has gone into reconfiguring, renovating, and making this property more attractive on the market. And it has been, if you drive by Northgate Shopping Center, prior to the conversion versus post-conversion, it is incredible the amount of traffic that they're able to generate there. There's always, the parking lot's always full. There's always people going in there. And the Save on Foods really is a top tier grocery store within the city. It has a lot of amenities that not a lot of the other grocery stores has in regards to some of the hot food amenities that they're able to kind of produce on site. And I believe they actually ship out some of the stuff that they produce there to the other Save on Foods locations within the city. So that is kind of their headquarter store, I guess you could call it. But today, we're just asking that the board maintain the board ordered value, $36,313,000. And I'm open to any questions in regards to the stuff I've presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions for the assessor?
Yes. Just on a quick, on page, your page 11, that's your income workup. The 36, and you 7.3, but the decision was at 7.75, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and it's further to the comments about the city position doesn't always default to what the board orders. We may not appeal the board order, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we adopt the board's valuation.
So irrespective of what the capitalized value in your workup shows, it automatically defaults to the decision.
That's right, because the board has ordered on it, and that's the value that's going to be put on the assessment roll and used for taxation purposes.
And if we go to page 19 of your brief, you'll see that at the second from the bottom, account 6595000, there are non-recoverable operating costs in this particular shopping center.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a negative adjustment for bad debts that somehow offsets about 42,000 of that. Yeah, there is some non-recoverable operating expenses for sure. But like I said, I would caution against looking to this rent roll as the property is in a period of transition. Specifically during 2017, it's still very much in transition.
Well, do you question the validity of the rent roll?
No, not at all. It's certainly it's accurate. Yeah,
The actual vacancy is 11.22%.
Yeah, it's valid. It's just not indicative of the market. It's not stabilized to the market. It's still in a transitionary period due to the conversion and the necessary time that's required for absorption of the inventory to occur.
Well, that was 217 is the date of this rent roll you've provided.
Yeah, that's correct.
Are you
But
saying
this is the
17 it hasn't finalized yet? It's not finished?
no. Certainly the construction all seems to finish during 2017 at various points throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
But full year, certainly not. Like if you're looking at it as a full year of data, it's missing some of the new buildings for the full year.
Well, they'd be post-reference. That's why.
No, it's not post-reference because it's some of the buildings came online during 2017 prior to the April 1st, 2018 reference date.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is that the income statement might only contemplate a portion of a year for those particular buildings. As of April 1st, 2018, all of that stuff is completed. But looking at 2018, if we're looking at post-reference data, you only get 4 months. So this just happens to be the full year statement that's been provided to us prior to the reference date. But again, it's certainly the building is still very much transitioning with all that's happened there.
Okay, if we can just go to your page 33 and you preface your remarks by saying this isn't relevant, then why is it here? The decision 19.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the evidence that was submitted for the 2020 appeal. And there was a table in that 2020 brief that showed some adjustments to rents for tenant inducements. And that's why I put this in as a kind of proactive measure. It could have been introduced as rebuttal. I just included it in the brief. Like I said, if you're not suggesting that rents need to be adjusted to factor in tenant inducements, then it's not of much use today.
Yeah, we're not suggesting that.
Yeah.
On page 35 of your brief, right in the middle of the page, it shows management expense of 5%, other expense of 2% were allowed by the assessor. You're aware of that?
Yeah, that's correct. Now, it's important for the board to understand that this is an appeal by an assessor from September 30th of 1997. So it's quite dated. The reference year for that particular property was 1995.
Yes, correct. Okay. And again, if you go to page 37, again, you'll see the management 5% is also included.
Yeah, that's correct. At the time, that was standard practice.
Yeah, if you go to page 39, this is a decision that shows a 7.75, but there's no inclination on your behalf to adjust this appeal to this cap rate to 7.5, 7.75.
That's correct. I'm still using the modeled cap rate at 7.30. The board has ordered for 2020 at least, and which subsequently flows through to 2022, which is what we're hearing today, the 36,313,000. And that, yeah, it looks to be based on a cap rate of 7.75% and an adjusted NOI. But again, without seeing the NOI, it's hard to say. You could probably work it back, but I haven't done that math.
We've tried to work it back. We couldn't, to be honest. We've tried it 3 or 4 different ways. Okay, those are all my questions on your brief. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harden, questions for the assessor?
So just for certainty then, this doesn't include Moore Center, or what used to be called Moore Center, doesn't include the car wash, and doesn't include the service station.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. So I have no further questions then.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, questions?
Yes, Mark, just to confirm that 2020 board decision that you're defending today, that did reflect the, renovation of the original mall plus the addition of the 3 separate addresses, new builds in 2017 that are included in this roll?
It should be, because the 2020 is still the April 1st, 2018 reference date.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. This is post renovation. That order should be.
Okay. Okay. And just to confirm, there's a pending municipal board that was filed by the agent at the time.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions, thank you. So, Mr. Story, when you're ready, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We only have essentially 2 issues to discuss today. One of them is the vacancy, which we think is paramount to the discussion, because the mall, in spite of the fact that it has been totally renovated with a significant capital cost, it's still showing an 11% vacancy rate. And that's in the assessor's brief. 11%. And the other thing we want to get on the record today, if we can, is that we believe the 5% should be included. And that's a management fee, non-recoverable landlord costs. So if we go to our brief, you'll see the picture at the front. That's the old building with a new face. They put a new canopy on it. It's saying what canopy. We'll go to our page 3, and you'll see we're accepting the city's model rents of $16.64. The $195.48 is essentially a finished mall. We've agreed with that. The 4% we don't believe is appropriate. We have a situation where this mall had 15 years of vacancy, 15 years. And and is still experiencing some vacancy, albeit it's been totally renovated for the most part. Again, we've got the 5% we're asking, and using these 10% with an 8% shortfall, we arrive at the number of 3 million, and using the 7.375 cap rate that was in the decision, 32,276,815. If you go, you'll see the photographs starting on page 5. That's the mall. So it's the same one. This is the CRUs, the Royal Bank. There's a few more. That end cap was vacant at the time. I think it's now full. Page 8. Page 9 is a decision at 36,313 that shows a 7.775%. We couldn't come to the exact numbers. Maybe the board will have a shot at it and do better. Then we go to the rent rolls, and this is the rent roll in 2016. And we just give you this to show you some history of this mall and why it became functionally obsolete. It was the first enclosed mall in Winnipeg, purportedly, and it had gone through its useful life by the time it was required for renovation. So we're using this is April 1st of 2016, that's previous, just to show the history. It had 58.79% vacancy at the reference date. We've attached everything here. The big vacancy, of course, was when Zellers left, and that was 120,000 square feet of space that vacated, and it took about 7 years to get that particular space released. So go to, if I can get you, just go to page 21, and that shows you the 58% vacancy at that, and then we flip to the 218. Now we're renovated and operating, starting on page 22, and you'll see the various tenants. Save On Foods is the big one. Their lease started in November of 2016. And certainly the mall must be coming to maturation after this length of time, and had to deal with COVID, of course. We have one issue I want to bring to your attention, and that is, I'll just find it, is we have one tenant, which is Fitness for Life, which is a 25,000 square foot unit at $950 a square foot. Because of COVID, they've had 2 major closures in the last couple of years. So in many of these tenants, there are over a dozen, they're close to a dozen, that have had some form of landlord rent relief or government relief. And credit losses are also part of vacancy. We're not asking for that at this point because it's primarily post-reference with COVID. But that's on page 28. You'll see at the very bottom, Good Life Fitness. Their junior workout facility is called Fitness for Life. That's what this is. It's a 25,000 square foot. It doesn't show as vacant because it's still operating, but it has incurred a very significant receivable to the landlord that may or may not be collectible, and should be given consideration to when thinking about vacancy and collection loss. By definition, collection losses, in addition to vacant space, are the definition in the Appraisal Institute of vacancy or collection losses. So write-offs of bad debts on rents are included in collection. That would make would make the 10.21%, you would add the arrears to that. We're not asking that at this point. That's a fact of life. That's what's happening in the world. So our issues are pretty straightforward. We would like to see a 10% up from 4% vacancy. We think that if you look at the history of vacancy, and we haven't spent a lot of time on it because of the major redevelopment, but if you look at the history of vacancy, it has always been there. They held out for an extra 5 years because they were hoping it would be a target, then a super target because they had enough space. That didn't come to fruition. And by the time the last tenant left, the Zellers left, was going on a decade. And that's what vacancy is about in this property. It's fraught with vacancy. I would suggest that it's bordering on chronic, but the redevelopment negates that. So I would respectfully submit that the board consider a 10% versus 4% that the city uses as a model. But the city that talks about not coming to its full potential, et cetera, then there should be some adjustment in the vacancy. 4% is not reasonable and doesn't reflect the economic realities of this piece of property. So I'm asking the 10% that's less than the actual vacancy at the 218 reference date. The 218 reference date, we're all saying is pre-COVID, so 10% is a reasonable figure. It's not excessive. It's the right number in my opinion. We are asking the 5% for management as well in all our files. I have a rebuttal on the management, which you've actually got it, but it's just our position on the 5%. And I've asked for 7.75% decision. That's the decision of the board. And that would come to an appropriate assessment of $32,276,815. And there's just a sample of the different numbers we're dealing with. 37,782, 36, 32, 40. And we're asking that we look at the vacancy and the management fee and the cap rate and arrive at an assessment of $32,276,815. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colatruglio, questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do have some questions. Starting on page 11, we're looking at the rent roll as of April 1st of 2016, correct? So this is very much during the renovation period, correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
Yeah, so that kind of explains the 58% vacancy. Is that it's
58% before 2016 as well? It had been 15 consecutive years of significant vacancy.
right? But in specific reference to this rent roll that's in the brief here, this is and this would have been the reference date for the 2018 assessment, correct?
That's correct. So and that's the point. What we did is we gave you the 58 from 79% actual and the 10.21% actual. They're both actual vacancies, correct?
Okay, and then starting on page 22, it looks like there's another rent roll in here. Now this is got some post-reference information, correct? This is November 1st of 2018.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And at the end of this rent roll, I mean, for the 2016 rent roll there's a summary of the area that's occupied and a calculation of the vacancy. That's on page 21. But at the end of this 2018 one, that appears to be missing, correct?
In the 218 rent roll?
Yeah, I don't see at the end of it where it would summarize the total area occupied and summarize the
Should be, just a moment. Yeah, if you go to our page 34.
34. Yeah, there's no summary of the vacancy here, correct?
Where the vacancy is 19,297. It's right on the bottom, total area, vacant area. So the total available space is 188, of which 19 was vacant. That's 10.21%.
And which page is that on?
34.
34. I don't appear to have that.
You don't have page 34?
Can the board confirm that that's information is supposed to be in the brief? I see some gaps on the page numbers. That's why I ask. It goes from page 29 to looks like 30, and then it jumps to page 35.
Yeah, that's what I have.
I've got 33.
I've got page 32, but page 33, then we go into that order, the municipal board order.
I'm talking at
No, on the assessors, on our complaints brief, not the assessors, correct?
Right.
Mark, you look at our brief.
I'm looking at the applicant brief, and I'm looking at a page number, page 30, and then the next page you see is it's a Collier's cap rate summary table. That's page 35. That's the next page that I have. So I'm missing between page 31 and 34. I don't have any of that. So if you're referencing that, I do not have that information. Can the board confirm that that's also what they're looking at? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here.
That is what I'm looking at. It goes from, it looks like a badly scribbled 30 to, again, the cap rates.
So
Which is page 35, right?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I've just checked the communication that this was attached to, and there are only 31 pages total. And it's as you guys have described. There's a chart that looks like it might say 30 handwritten in blue, and then the next page after that says 35. And it's the cap rates, Q2 2018 cap rates.
Okay, so just so you know, Sid, that there is some information missing, that if you're referencing anything past, just so you know, we have 30 and then we have 35. Everything else is missing. And to address the rebuttal package that was submitted, I'm okay with that being included. The board has heard extensively both sides of the argument in regards to the non-recoverable expense allowance. I'm okay with that package going in. But back to the information here. I guess between these two rent rolls, we're looking at vacancy that's been greatly reduced post renovation. Once the property has had some time to sit on the market and attract some tenants to the post renovated space, it's come down significantly, and it continues to this date to attract tenants and reduce the vacancy that's there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, but we're
How
specific.
developed? You won't see that upswing because there isn't the potential to do any more development there.
Right. It's pretty much
even
fully developed. Yep. Now, in regards to cap rates, I know you've adopted the board's cap rate of 7.75%. But the only cap rate evidence you've included is this Collier's cap rate table, correct?
And the decision.
And then the decision, okay.
Yeah.
And I'll point out to the board that it appears that the Collier's cap rate information is actually Q2 of 2018, which would be post-reference.
Okay.
But if you're looking for the Collier's numbers,
They wouldn't.
if it's anywhere, it would be in my brief, but I don't believe for neighborhood shopping center that they show those on our table. And it may just be something that they don't publish for that particular Q1 of 2018. I'm not certain. Because that really is the only cap rate information that's been submitted in either of the briefs, is that the city has its 20th and 80th percentile and low and high, and then it has any outside sources that were. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that some of the information that's been included is post-reference, so for the board to make note of that and put the appropriate weight on that. Now, in regards to the rates, the rents, you're saying you're accepting all of our rents, basically.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so you start with the same potential rent.
Vacancy and management.
Vacancy and management, okay.
Yeah, cap rate.
And then the 10% vacancy, that, like you said, it is based on, it's slightly lower than what the actuals are at as of the reference date. Do you feel that in the greater market, that's what the neighborhood shopping center vacancy rate is, 10%, or is that specific to this property?
Well, I don't know. I'm not an expert on neighborhood shopping centers, but it would seem to me that given the change in retail and the scope of retail and Amazon and bricks and mortar, and now COVID and the coming COVID, I don't think any of us, you'd have to be a clairvoyant to pick the numbers.
Right. Okay. But
So
some of those
can't
issues
speak
go
at all.
on
I know
that's
that
post-reference, right?
They've experienced in your rent roll at 11% and in ours 10%. You know, I think the problem here, I'm looking at all these now. I've got all these sheets and they all came out together. Page 30, I think, might be the problem. Have the board found these 30, 31, 32?
We don't have them.
It was never sent to the Board of Revision.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, well.
Okay. I have no further questions.
10.21% is what it shows, but I'm under oath of making it up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Harden, questions for the applicant?
No questions at this time, no.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, questions for the applicant?
Yes, two quick ones, please. Thank you. Mr. Story, on your workup, pardon me. You've also presented the revised assessment that the assessor is defending, and the board order stated that it was based on a cap rate of 7.75 and an adjusted net NOI, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So is it not possible that adjusted NOI reflected your previous request for a higher vacancy rate?
I don't think so, but I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, because in your workup, you're assuming it isn't included, and then you're asking for another 10% adjustment over that possible adjustment that the board originally had done. Would that be fair to surmise?
So it was the board, I believe, confirmed the 4%.
Well, it says adjusted NOI, so it is vague, but it possibly could have included an increase. We go component by component. We don't know exactly what that previous board adjusted or revised.
Yeah, and it's a challenge for the property owner and our end of it.
Okay.
They're hard to reconcile. This particular one, you can take a swap at, so it doesn't reconcile very well. We were trying to arrive at what the adjusted NOI was. We didn't get that number, that's why we put all four in.
Okay. All right, that is my only question, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I thank you. I have no questions for the applicant. Mr. Colatruglia, desire for summation on this property?
Yeah, I'll summarize quick. Again, we looked at market rents for this. We looked at market vacancy. I explained that the property is very much in a transitionary period here, which explains the higher than normal vacancy. And I don't think it's appropriate if we're looking to market parameters as of April 1st of 2018 to make any adjustment to the neighborhood shopping center vacancy. So that's in regards to management, the city position on all properties have been to allow a 2% non-recoverable expense allowance. There is no further adjustment for management. But again, you guys have heard this in length, so I won't cover it. But that's basically my concern is that the board is ordered on this. They've put forth the value $36,313,000, and we're asking for that to be maintained. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Story, summation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members, and thank you for your patience with me today. I just want to summarize quickly. Our concern here is what's vacancy. What is an appropriate vacancy for this property? All you can look at is the history. The buildings have been dressed up. There's been some rework, but they're essentially the same property. It's been demalled in terms of portions been stripped off. But the vacancy that the assessor has on page 32 of his brief is 11.22%. We explained to you that going into this particular reference year, the previous reference year, 2016 was 58% vacant, and the 10 years prior to that, it was vacant in the same amount because of one location, the Zeller store, which just turned out to be too big. So we think that it's appropriate that vacancy be looked at a higher rate. The 10 is less than the page 32 of the brief, where it's 11.22%. I think 10 is a reasonable amount. And if someone were looking at buying this shopping center, I suspect they would attribute a higher than 4% vacancy allowance just based on its history. And with that, I'll thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your presentations today. And we have heard all the items that are scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
And you too. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Sid.
Bye, Sid.